Good to see you.
A great opportunity for the city of Caribou to remember some of the great memories that we have and the experiences that we've had, and particularly Colonel Joe Kittinger. And definitely want to show appreciation for him and including us in his life and the many things that he's been able to do and experience, and helping us or making us part of that. If I might quickly say a few things before you say a few things. As I was reading this, I'm the city manager for Caribou, I guess I should say. I'm Dennis Marker. I've been here for a little over a year now. My family made the leap from Utah about a year ago, and we thought that was a trip. And I thought, wow, I've got this picture of a guy in my office with a big bushy mustache and a big balloon in the background, and he made an even bigger trip. And it started here, but really it started a long time ago in his experience with the Air Force, and how impressive it is to look back on some of his experiences. I know that most of my knowledge at this point is from Wikipedia, and you can never trust Wikipedia, but if any of that is true, it certainly is a pleasure to be here with you today. And I woke up this morning thinking about what I could share, and I'm not going to take much longer, but for some reason the words of Don Quixote and the Impossible Dream came to my mind this morning. And if I might share that just a little bit, because I think it does have relevance to what the Colonel did for Caribou and in his own life. It says, to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, and to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, and to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for that heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world will be better for this, that one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable star. Thank you, Colonel, for again being with us today, and I'll turn the time over to you for whatever you would like to share with us.
Thank you, sir. I have a 12,000 word speech prepared. Everybody relax, it's going to take a while. There's empty seats down here. First thing I'd like to do, if you could, there's a beautiful American flag there. Everybody stand up and let's all say pledge allegiance to our wonderful flag, to our wonderful country. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
No, we should never forget what that flag represents. It represents the freedom that we have, the democracy that we have. We should never forget it. This flag over here, this POW flag, is also an interesting thing. You know that POW flag represents, pretty close to 600 people that were POWs. They were the lucky ones that survived. There were 57,000 Americans who died in Vietnam.
Wow.
Yeah. So when we look at that flag, we should think about all those Americans who gave their life in Vietnam. And this thing just represents a very small percentage of it. When I was POW in Vietnam, and by the way, I got shot down by the world's greatest fighter pilot on the other side. Being spastic helps, but it didn't help me that day. But I ended up in solitary confinement for a lot of time, because they knew I shot down a MiG, and they didn't like me, and I didn't like them. So So I spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. Nothing to read. All I could do was sit there and think about anything to keep my mind active. And one of the projects I started on was how to fly around the world in a balloon. No one had ever flown solo around the world in a balloon. And so I designed the balloon, the systems of communications, the gondola, the team. That was, in my, I thought it actually engaged. And when I got back, I went to Ed Yost. I said, Ed, we were over several beers. I said, Ed, you know, when I was a POW, one of my dreams was to fly around the world solo. He says, well, let's make it happen. I said, okay, let's just do it. So we started working, and we were looking for a sponsor, and they're hard to find. One little story I'll share with you. I had a presentation in front of the directors of Walt Disney. They're right there in Orlando. I figured they'd be a wonderful sponsor at Disney World. And the whole board was there, and I made the presentation, and the next day they called me back and said, well, we decided we're not going to sponsor you. I said, well, would you mind telling me why? He said, well, if you got killed, Mickey would cry. I said, yeah, but if I'm successful, he'd laugh his butt off. But in any event, we kept looking for a sponsor, and we finally found one. And we had to change our objective from flying around the world to flying as far as we could fly. And we figured that would give us the publicity that we needed to fly around the world. And Caribou was approached. The first guy wanted to go to Presque Isle, because that's where Max Anderson was. I said, no. So Caribou was the choice, and it was so fortunate because the people in Caribou are just wonderful people, and we've enjoyed our relationship and the beautiful city it has. And we've always had wonderful support from the city manager here. I don't think anybody knew the mayor's name, but everybody knew the city manager's name. And a lot of the problems that we had that were difficult to solve, we'd go to the city manager and he would solve the problem. And my friend Jerry Drake gave us a hangar out there at the airport. And that's where we put all our equipment, and we did all the work putting it together and assembling the equipment. And one day Ed Joe said, we have to find a place to launch the balloon. So he got into his van with a couple other guys, and they started driving around the county. And they spent 8 hours driving all around the county looking for a place to launch the balloon. And they picked this site. And for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's nice and open, and it's low. This whole area here is lower than half a mile away. When you come here and you come down the hill, you realize how low this area is. And that's what you want for a balloon, so the winds are light. So this site was selected by Ed Yost as the best place to launch the balloon. On the 14th of September, we had the indication that the weather was good. We had a parade through town as they brought the gondola out here, the balloon and everything. And they started working at about noon, and I was resting. I wanted to be right out and bushy-tailed because I knew it was going to be a long, tough trip. So I went to the motel down the road, no longer here now, but I rested most of the day to be prepared for that night. Now, my meteorologist was a guy named Bob Rice, and we had talked for like months and months and months about what we needed to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. And he was a brilliant meteorologist. I had the greatest confidence in him. And we talked every day just about for the last couple of weeks about what we needed to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. So on the 13th of September, he called me and he said, it looks good for tomorrow. So I said, okay, that's it. We're going tomorrow. So we're down here at night, balloons inflated. A lot of the people here today were out here that night. I think half of Caribou and Prescott was here to help us on the launch and to watch it. And we also had a Catholic priest, Protestant minister, and a Jewish rabbi come here to give a prayer. And I figured that you might as well use every advantage you could ever get. So I couldn't find a Buddhist, but I had everybody else here say the prayer. About 3/4 of the way through, the balloon's inflated, and we're getting close to launch. And a kid come running up to me. He said, "There's a phone call for you up at my house," which was that farm right up on the hill up there. So I go up there and on the phone, and the guy said, "My name is Bill Smith." He said, "I'm the CEO of Weather Services," which was the organization that Bob Rice worked for. He said, "We have decided that the weather is not good enough for you to make this flight. So we don't want you to go." I said, "Sir, is that what Bob Rice said?" "Well, no," he said, "but Bob Rice works for me, and we've decided that you can't go." I said, "Well, sir, would you put Bob Rice on the phone?" So Bob gets on the phone, and I said, "Bob, what the hell's going on? What changed?" He said, "Nothing." He said, "These people just don't know anything about how to fly a balloon." I said, "Well, put your manager back on." And I said, "Sir, I'm pretty sure you're concerned, but I'm going anyway. I trust Bob Rice." And with that, he said, "Well, you're doing it on your own." I said, "Well, it was on my own to begin with." So we kept going, but it was just a little sidelight I thought you'd enjoy. That at the last few minutes, they tried to cancel the flight. And Bob and I had talked that if we lost radio communications, that I had enough knowledge on the wind flows that I could make the flight all the way across without talking to anybody. He had that detail in my mind that he gave me, so that high pressure air was going to move here and here and here, and so I had a plan that we had both agreed on how I was going to fly across the Atlantic if I lost communications. And I only had one time I was able to, my single sideband radio work. But just before takeoff, somebody walked up and gave me a box of chicken, fried chicken. So I set it down in the gondola and I took off. It was a little chilly, if I remember. And I get up to about, half an hour away from here. And all of a sudden, somebody comes on the radio. And it's my friend Bob Snow in an airplane, flying from here up to Boston to the weather place. And Sherry was in the airplane, and his wife and a couple other people. And I just opened up the chicken and bit into the leg, and it was frozen. So I had a frozen chicken leg I was trying to absorb. And Snow says, "Listen to this, Kittinger. Hear this." I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's a bottle of champagne we just opened." I said, "Now listen to this." It was lunch. "What's that?" He said, "That's the lobster we're eating." Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I wish you could have my frozen chicken leg. But everything went just as planned. And the next morning, and now I had planned a lot about the food I was going to eat, because it was going to be a 3 or 4 day trip, and I wanted to have the right food. So I bought all kinds of food, dehydrated food, crepes Suzettes and lobster, and you name it, whatever I could find that was dehydrated. And I had a big box full of dehydrated food that was a gourmet's delight. And I had this little gasoline stove to heat the water to cook the dehydrated food in. So the next morning, about 10 o'clock, I was getting kind of hungry, so I decided I would have something to eat. I lit the stove, and it caught on fire. And I threw it overboard. And put out the fire in the back of the gondola. And there went my exotic food that I was going to eat across the ocean, because I had to have heat. So my food was 4 cans of frozen spaghetti, and meatballs when they're frozen are hard as hell to eat, I'll tell you that. But I would sleep 10 minutes at a time. And in 3.5 days, I slept 2.5 hours. And I would sleep 10 minutes at a time because if something happened to the balloon, I was going to be in the ocean in 10 minutes. So in 3.5 days, I slept 2.5 hours. Everything went pretty much on schedule, except there was an overcast the whole way, but I expected that. And of course, we didn't have GPS in those days, barely had radios, I didn't talk to anybody because I didn't need to. I was flying between 18 and 20,000 feet, and that's below the altitude that airlines fly across the Atlantic Ocean. Now every day there's 450 or so airplanes that fly across the Atlantic Ocean. And the whole flight I had not talked to anybody. So one night, the third night, second night, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, I was a little bored. So I called on the radio on emergency frequency 121.5, and I said, "Does any airplane hear me?" And this airplane came back and said, "Yeah, this is TWA 101." I said, "Okay, let's go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frequency." So we did. And I said, he said, "Where are you?" I said, "Hell, I don't know. I'm in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "Well, I'm 500 miles out from London, starting my letdown." He said, "You know, this is really amazing, but on my airplane, your chase crew is on my airplane." Now think about the coincidence of all the airplanes going across the Atlantic Ocean, that my chase crew is on board the airplane.
Yeah.
I get goosebumps when I think about it.
Yeah.
So he brought Sherry up to the cockpit and gave her the radio, and we talked for several minutes. I talked with Bob Snow, and finally the captain came back on the radio and said, "Well, I have to cut this off. I've been let down. I'm landing at Heathrow in a little bit." But what a coincidence that was. Bob Rice and he had told me that you're going to be flying basically east, and there's a high pressure area up over the Arctic, and it's moving down south. And he says, when it gets to this point, you're going to, instead of going east, you're going to start going north, and you're not going to go any further. Now, one of my objectives, besides having a good time, was to beat Maxie Anderson's record. His record was 3,200 miles. So I had to go further than that. So, and my idea was to go as long as I could go. But when I got around Genoa, Greece, all of a sudden the wind shifted. And now instead of going east, I'm heading north. And to the north, there was a thunderstorm, a tremendous thunderstorm, and mountains up to 12,000 feet, and I could only go to 8,000 feet by this time. So it proved it that I'd land. Couldn't go any further. Bad terrain, bad weather. Smart thing to do is to land. But there was a 30-knot wind, and I landed into some trees. And as I hit the trees, I got knocked out of the gondola, and I fell about 5 feet. It hit the only rock within 5 miles, and broke my foot. Well, Sherry was in the helicopter, that's their helicopter chasing me with a cameraman, and she jumped out. They land close there. They jumped out, coming over. Now, when I landed in a group of 7 Italian wood choppers. They were cutting down trees in the middle of the forest, and I landed right on the top of the trees they were cutting down. And you talk about some amazing people. Those guys were just really amazed when they figured out, you know, this balloon just came from the United States of America. And about that time, Sherry runs up with 2 bottles of champagne. I poured one on the top of my head, as tradition, as you know, and then the other, Sherry and I drank it. Whole damn bottle right there on the spot. And if we had another bottle, we'd drink that too, I think. But anyway, about that time, my foot started hurting. And Sherry got these 7 wood choppers to pick me up and to carry me up to the chopper. And I went a total of 3,600 miles, 86 hours, and I set 6 world records that'll be there for a long, long time. And it was a small balloon, and we had a high wind, and we were we had a wonderful flight, and it all started right here in Caribou. Now, the people in Caribou are just so wonderful, and they helped us in every which way. You're all just a wonderful community. And we were all in awe of the appreciation and the appreciation we had for all your help. So a couple of years ago, a guy called me up and says, I'm thinking about flying across the Atlantic Ocean in a cluster balloon. I'm not sure where I want to go. I said, well, that's no problem. I know where to go. But he said, you call the city manager in Caribou, Maine, and I gave him the phone number. And I said, that's the place you want to go. And he did that. And I told him, I said, people will turn out to help any way they can. And the night of the launch, 3/4 of Caribou was out here at 9 o'clock at night. It was cold as hell. And they were up all night long, filling balloons, getting us ready to launch. But in no other community would you have that support that we had. And he could have never, ever done that flight without all of the natives out there to help him inflate those 365 balloons. So the flight was made possible by the wonderful people in Caribou. The smart thing is he made a landing in Newfoundland because he could never make it across the Atlantic Ocean. So he went as far as he could go. And he told me later on, he said that he wanted to thank me for telling him about Caribou because he was so appreciative of the support that he got from the community. And so that was a fun thing for the community. We all had a lot of fun doing it. It was exciting. It was something I'd never seen before. And they'll probably never see it again, what he did. I had such a wonderful career. The flying across the Atlantic was just an adventure. It had never been done before, and I was just interested in just setting some records and just having a fun project. There was no science, there was no big advances made in anything except spending money and having fun here in Caribou. Sherry and I were delighted when we were told about this event today and this beautiful park that they've made here, and we really appreciate it. And we come here once in a while, every couple of years, and reminisce about the great fun we had here and the adventure we had here in Caribou. I would like this time to ask if there are any questions. I'm sure somebody's got a question. Yes. Yes,
Where did
ma'am.
the name Rosie O'Grady come from?
Say again?
Where did the name Rosie O'Grady come from?
Rosie O'Grady was a dining and entertainment complex in Orlando, Florida. They had a Dixieland room, a country western room, a disco room, 5 or 6 restaurants. It was just a fun place. And I was in charge of the flying circus. And I had 5 airplanes, and we did mandatory and skywriting every day, 365 days a year. And every day I'd fly either a banner, or if the weather was good, I'd do skywriting. And it was a fun job. The other thing was we had balloons. Matter of fact, Sherry and I owned 6 hot air balloons that we sold, didn't give. We sold the rides every day. And so it was a really fun place. It was the 4th largest tourist attraction in the state of Florida. It was a place that if you had Aunt Matilda from Presque Isle came to town, you would take her there because it was such a wonderful place to go to, entertainment place. And Bob Snow was one of the sponsors for my flight. And we flew hot air balloons all over the world. We flew gas balloons all over the world. We flew in the Gordon Bennett race. We won that race 4 years. We flew in Australia and in Europe and Germany and Italy, all over the world. Lithuania, just having fun flying balloons. And it was to answer your question, it really was. Any more questions? Yes.
If you hadn't had bad weather and mountains at the end of your flight, how much farther could you have gone with the helium and the ballast you had?
Well, I was down to my underwear for ballast. And my maps were throwing those overboard. I could have made it probably over to Albania because I'd have to go up. And I could have made it to Albania. I could have made it across the Mediterranean. But when that wind's changed, that changed the whole thing. But I was going to go as far as I could go. That was the goal. Because the purpose of the flight was to convince the sponsor that we could put together a system to break records.
Oh, yeah.
And we did that, hoping that we would get sponsors for it. And we got none. So Steve Fawcett, wonderful guy, wonderful pilot, he set the world's record for the first man to fly solo around the world. And he was a brilliant, good friend, great guy, good balloons. And he had unlimited pocketbook. You didn't have to worry about a sponsor. That's fun when you can do that.
Yeah.
Pay for it out of your own pocket. Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Did you train yourself to wake up every 10 minutes, or did you use an alarm clock of sorts?
I had an alarm clock
Okay.
go off 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's how I would work it. And I would wait until I really got really tired. Then I would lay down and sleep for 10 minutes, jump up and make certain I was okay. And one time I'm flying along and a supersonic jet boomed me. And it was night and I thought the balloon just blew up.
Oh.
And it was a supersonic jet that was going to either London or back to New York. And about 6 months after my book came out, the pilot of the Concorde wrote me a letter and said, I'm sorry I boomed you. I wasn't scared. Any more questions?
My question is about your time as a POW. How long were you held?
I was a POW for 11 months.
Long
And I
time.
had friends there that were there for 7 years. And John McCain was in the same jail I was in, and we talked frequently. But you know, you come out of a place like that a much better American because you appreciate what we have in our everyday life, what our government, what our country represents. So every POW that came out of there a better Christian and a better American because of the experience that we had. And I must say that when we came back, the reception that we got in the United States was a wonderful, wonderful reception. And we all really were deeply indebted for that. Any more questions?
How much time do you have in balloons, gas, and
I have 2,000 hours in balloons, and I have 17,000 hours in airplanes, and 93 different types of airplanes. I was experimental test pilot for 10 years. And so I still fly balloons and aircraft, so this guy's still in my office. And this is a very fortunate person to have aviation be my main theme in my life. Yes, sir.
Colonel Joe, could you tell us a little bit the time you parachuted from like 105,000 feet?
Well, let me answer the question by saying that you need to buy my book. It's called Come Up and Get Me. It's available on Amazon.com, and you can send it to me and I'll sign it. And I'll just give you an idea that it had never been done before. It needed to be done. It was a research project to determine if man could exist in space and how we could get him back in emergency escape. So it was an interesting project. I had a great team of people, and to do something like that, it takes 3 things. You have to have confidence in your team, you have to have confidence in your equipment, and to have confidence in yourself. Those are the things you got to have. And whatever you're going to do, you need those 3 ingredients to make it work. If you're missing, you're in trouble. Now, I had 13 men on my team, and all of them were dedicated to get me up there and down safely. And that's how it happened. That's how I got back safely. And every day after a test, we'd go to the bar and order some beer we would sit there and we would go through an exercise called "What If," and I'd write it down. And somebody would say, "Well, what if this happened?" And we would write it down and come up with a solution. And then we'd have another beer and say, "Well, what if?" So after every test we made, we'd have a "what if" session. And we built a big list of answers if something was going to happen, what we would do. So I had a great team, and that's what it takes to do something like that, is a team of great people. I had a great team here in Caribou, and they all were dedicated to the same thing, to make it happen properly and safely. Yes, ma'am.
How many hours do you have in gas balloons and how many hours in hot air?
Well, I have, in gas balloons, I have about 1,000. I have about 1,200 hours in hot air balloon. Thank you for the question. The other thing is that I was there to assess equipment for pilots and astronauts. And that jump that I made was my 33rd parachute jump. Because they didn't want me to be an experienced parachute jumper, because pilots and astronauts are not experienced skydivers. So we were looking for equipment that would work for the average aviator. And today, all these years later, some 58 years later, every airplane in the world uses a small drogue chute to give stabilization, even at low altitude and high altitude. So what we did back in 1959, 1960 is still being used today. So we're very pleased about that.
Wow.
Did you have any more questions, young lady? Okay.
You covered it.
Yes, ma'am.
Colonel, what physical preparation did you have to do for that pressure jump? I mean, obviously you had to be in extremely good physical shape.
I trained every day. I was in very good shape. And you won't believe this, but I weighed 160 pounds. And I was 32 years old when I made the jump. But I was in very good shape.
And what about breathing? You had oxygen? Did you have oxygen?
Oh, I had a pressure suit and oxygen. Without that, you can't live. Without a pressure suit, it's working. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
So during that jump, it's reported you were free falling for 4.5 minutes. What's going through your mind besides, I haven't fallen all the way yet?
Well, what's going through my mind is that it's a long ways down, and I had an altimeter stopwatch, and I had a great interest in that altimeter. And I would look at that altimeter about every 10 seconds to see where I was. Remember, no one had ever been that high in a parachute jump. The highest jump before that that I made was 76,000 feet. And the highest jump before that was 40,000 feet, which was the world's record when I jumped from 76,000. But I was very interested in the longer I fell, the happier I got. And once the chute opened, I was really happy. And once I landed and everything was still attached, I was really, really happy. And my crew showed up, and we had a great reunion, because we had worked together for a year and a half to make something like this happen, and we had done it safely, and that was the objective. And I didn't have any idea that all these years later, almost 60 years later, they're still using the same equipment that we designed back in 1959. Now, about in the year 2010, I got a phone call from a guy who said there's a man that wants to break a record. Well, I used to get a call like that about once a month. But the guy that was talking to me was a fellow who was the CEO of the pressure company. And he said, I'd like to have you come here and listen to this presentation to see if it's something we should get involved with. So I go to Worcester, Mass, to the factory, and I heard the lecture, how they were going to do it, and the objectives and everything. I was really impressed that they really had a good research objective for it, and they would really be honest about the safety of the project. So I was really interested in it. I went at lunchtime. I told the CEO of the parachute company that I thought we ought to go ahead and try it. So the Red Bull said, well, we'd like to bring you on board. I said, well, I have 4 conditions that have to be met for me to accept this position. And the first thing is, there has to be at least 2 balloons for every jump. And because you inflate them, if it blows up or if it just short of the ground, you want to be able to go again the next day. And I figured, well, when I told them it was going to double the cost for the balloons, they'd say, well, thank you very much. But they didn't. They said, well, what's the second? Well, the second objective is we have to make 3 balloon jumps. And the reason why is most people want to just go right up to 100,000 feet and jump. And that's just dumb because you have to do it in stages. When you test fly an airplane, you don't do maximum when you first flight. So I said, you have to have 3 jumps. And I figured, well, they're going to say, hell no. We're not going to have 3 jumps. Nobody ever said that. But they didn't say this. Okay, what's the third? Well, the guy who was going to do the jump, his name was Felix Baumgartner. He was a base jumper. And so I said, well, the third thing is that Felix has to quit base jumping. Because I'm not going to work my butt off and jump. And the day before the jump, he does a base jump and busts his butt. So he has to quit base jumping. So he was there, and he said, okay, I'll quit base jumping. So those are the 3 conditions. He said, well, what's the last condition? Well, the last thing is that I don't have to drink a bottle of Red Bull. I figured that did it. I figured they were going to say goodbye, thank you very much. But they didn't. They said, well, we'd like to have you on board. So I designed the life support system, and I worked with the jumpers and on the parachute, the gondola, and I stayed very, very busy for 5 years almost. Yeah. And I worked with Felix every day on the checklist and the procedures and everything. Now, Felix was a very professional parachute jumper. He had 2,500 parachute jumps versus my 33. He was a skilled skydiver, and he wanted to make a jump skydiving. So he didn't want a stabilization device on him. He wanted to set a record for skydiving. So we did the, Sherry and I went on a trip, and we couldn't launch from here, I'm sorry. But we went to Roswell and found a real good launch site at Roswell in the airfield. So that's where we selected. And we made 2 jumps from 75,000 to 100,000 feet. And we're ready for the 3rd jump. Now you can imagine this, there were over 200 people at the launch site. I thought I was at Caribou again with all the people that were there. And there was 35 cameras covering it. There were 11 cameras on the gondola. Felix had 5 cameras on him. He had a radio, he could talk to me. It was a completely different environment. And he had a full pressure suit, whereas what I had was a partial pressure suit, which was what the U-2 pilots were wearing back in those days. So we worked very diligently on the project. And finally, we were ready to go for the last jump. And by the way, when they inflated the first balloons, the big 39 million cubic foot balloon, imagine that, covered 40 acres if you laid it out. The balloon weighed 4,000 pounds. When we got to ceiling altitude, it was almost 700 feet across. It was an enormous balloon. And it was all lit out and it's inflated, and the winds came up and destroyed the balloon. And that verified my insistence on having 2 balloons. Because 2 days later, the weather was good, and we launched. And I had a television camera right there looking at Felix. We could talk, and I could see everything in the capsule. And I knew where every switch was. And if he got ready to, if he put his hand on something I didn't like, I'd say, don't touch that, leave it alone. Because I could see everything he was doing. And much to his dismay. But it made it safer because of all the communications that we had in the video. And we developed the checklist, the emergency procedures and everything. And we did it challenge and response. And like we'd say, turn on switch number 15. And he would come back and say, turning on switch number 15. And if he didn't do that, we would not go to the next step. I made him verify what was on the checklist. And so we're finally at 128,000 feet, everything ready to go. And I said, okay, it's time to get serious. And how many here watched that on television, by the way? It was exciting, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It was exciting to us, too. But we were delighted that the whole world could share with that adventure because it was an adventurous event. We did have a little problem during the flight, and I had a procedure worked out with the TV producer that if I said, Phil, check your monitor, he would pull the plug because we didn't want to share with the whole world that we were having a problem. So one time we had a problem and I said, Phil, check your monitor, and he pulled the plug and we cut off all the television and we went to the other guys that were talking and so forth while we fixed it. And we did fix it in a couple of minutes. We went back on the TV. There were over 35 satellites were hooked up to our site during the jump. Over 2 billion people that watched that jump around the world. So it was a very popular event worldwide. We got one place on the checklist. And I said, disconnect the hose. And he did it. And I said, well, if I'm ready for the next test, you did not confirm what I told you the last time. You've got to tell me what you did. So he said, all right, I disconnected the hose. Said, okay, now we'll go ahead. But I wouldn't let you get away with anything because what we were doing was for safety. He went through the checklist. He stood on the door. During the briefing on the ground, I told him, Felix, if you don't make a stand-up landing on parachute jump, don't come back. Just keep on going. So he jumped. After about a minute, he started turning to the left. You probably remember that spinning you saw. Well, he only got up to 60 RPM. It looked more, but it wasn't that bad. But you see, he's fallen in a vacuum. There's no air there. And when you're skydiving, you use the air to maneuver your body. Well, in space, there's no air. It's a vacuum. So what he's normally used to control his body is a different world completely. But he finally got out of the spin, and he went supersonic, and he did not feel it. He went up to a speed of 847 miles an hour, true airspeed. Then he went subsonic, about 70,000 feet, and he didn't feel that. People on the ground heard the sonic boom when he went supersonic. Witnesses were right there. They heard the boom when he went supersonic. He fell for 4 minutes and 30 seconds, so I still hold the record for the longest time in free fall. 4 minutes and 36 seconds. And true to the agreement we had, he made a stand-up landing. And he set a world record for the highest parachute jump, free fall, longest free fall, highest everything. So it was a very successful program for Red Bull. And they were a great company to work for. They were a great sponsor. They never complained about cost or anything. And by the way, the cost doubled from the first start. But when you work with a corporation, only one guy working with, that's a wonderful thing to happen. And the guy that wanted to make it happen was the president of the company. And so if we need another $1 million, he just said do it. So we had great support from Red Bull. And they were interested in the same thing that we were, and that was the safety of Felix Baumgartner. fun project, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. And after that, we went on a world tour, giving briefings, most in the United States, but we also went to England and Germany and Austria, giving at various museums, giving lectures on the project. I've talked a lot longer than I planned on, but I wanted to share that adventure with you. And I want to once again thank all the people of Caribou for the support that you gave us on our project and what you gave to Jonathan Trapp. And if I get another phone call about where to do a balloon flight, it'll be Caribou if I have anything to do with it. And I was told last night that there's a woman in England that's planning on flying solo across the Atlantic. And if she ever contacts me, I'm going to tell her she's got to come to Caribou. This should be the balloon capital of the world for fun flights. Are there any more questions?
What's your next adventure, Colonel?
Say again?
What's your next adventure?
Watch the sun up tomorrow morning. Any other questions? Well, once again, thank you for inviting us here, and it was a pleasure to be back to Caribou. Thank you very much.